Today on JD Cars, we're going to be attempting to pull the exhaust manifold off of this 2005 Toyota Tacoma. Alright, so if you guys haven't seen my previous video on this Tacoma, we actually just picked it up from a Copart auction. This is a completely sight unseen purchase. Like, I had no idea what the condition of the truck was other than it ran and it drove. And it does have a check engine light on. It's making kind of a clicking, popping noise, and it was really only happening at low RPM when accelerating and when under load. And I thought about it. I said, this probably isn't transmission. It's probably not valves. I bet this is an exhaust leak. Took it down to Gyro at Asbury Street Car Care. Shout out to Gyro. Thank you so much for all your help. He took it for a spin around the block and he said, oh yeah, definitely an exhaust leak. We popped the hood, got a light in there, and we saw and found the source of the leak. He also stood on the brake and put it in drive, put the engine under load with the hood popped up, and it was very easy to tell where the leak was coming from. It's on the passenger side. The manifold looks quite warped, but without any further ado, we'll get the 550 out of the way, pull that beast of a taco in here, get her up on the lift, and see what we can do. Before we get too into the exhaust repair, grab our creeper, do a little once over here. Try not to get the camera all soaked, but here's our front end, which really doesn't look too bad. Of course, our control arms are quite rusted. I do think this thing had a frame replacement though, and so did Gyro. Definitely got a little bit of rust. The frame was definitely replaced. For being a 2005 Tacoma with 246,000 miles from Maine, there's no way this is the original frame. Like, I don't know how this would be. It's very clean. So frame looks good, drivetrain looks all right. Make our way back here. This is where I expect to see more rust in the rear. Really not too bad. That's what I was expecting. Our tow hitch is kind of the majority of the rust. Aside from that, leaf springs are in pretty good shape. We're definitely going to need some struts. I think the struts are shot. Brake lines don't look too bad. A little bit of rocker rust here. Yeah, all in all, not too bad. We are working on the passenger side, but I quickly went over here to check the lug size. These are lock, like security lugs. And I freaked out. Luckily, whoever sold this to me left the tool in the glove box, so we're good to go. So I'm going to be soaking the crap out of those studs and nuts with some state pen penetrating oil. Probably going to use a mixture of this, TB Blaster, and heat to get those off. Hoping that we don't snap any. That's kind of the biggest concern here. Somewhat as expected, we snapped off our first stud here in the back corner. Right up there, just snapped right off. You can see it's full of rust. So I'm expecting more of them to snap off. This is going to be a bigger project than anticipated, but we're going to power through it. Let's do this. All right, a little bit of an update here. I'll let you guys take a look at this. Probably see where I'm going with this. We snapped off two more of the studs. They were just completely rusted. Just snapped immediately. So, because the other ones are so stubbornly in there, we're gonna get some blades, some new cutting discs, cut away and try to get this sucker off, and then we're gonna have to deal with pulling out the studs, which is gonna be a whole project in and of itself. Oh, you see that? That's another stud, except this one is cut off. I just used the good old Harbor Freight, or Central Pneumatic, same thing. Right angle grinder with a little cutoff disc on there. So able to cut off both of those lower front ones right there. And I was able to get that one right there. So I was pretty impressed. Toyota left plenty of room for us to work in there. was able to get this whole thing in and cut those off. Now I just have to go underneath and take off these rinky-dink hardware bolts. As you can see, they are not factory. This side might have been messed with already, I'm not really sure, but we're gonna pull these guys off and we should be able to pull out the whole catalytic converter manifold setup. All right, so up on the step ladder here, we just popped off the manifold. As you can see here, use this big 2-inch pry bar and pried her off of the cylinder head. See right here are 3 studs that we cut, and you can't see the other ones because they are sheared off completely. These ones will probably be a little bit easier to deal with. Pretty easy to weld the nut right around this. The other ones we can use a bolt or just fill in the hole with weld and work on getting these suckers out now. Oh, and we do want to go down there and disconnect our O2 sensor right here. Gonna unplug that and we should be able to yank this manifold out of here. Alright, so we got this sucker out. It's time to clean up these bolts with the carbide burr, or really anything that can clean them up. Just want to get them clean for welding and pull the welder out and see what we can do. Alright, so I just used the carbide burr right here on the die grinder to clean up the studs. I have 2 different size nuts here, these smaller ones and slightly larger ones. I think I'll use the larger ones to slip over the 3 studs that are actually exposed, and the smaller one on the studs that are more recessed and almost flush. So this should hopefully help keep the weld puddle confined and directed at the stud, whereas this one will go all the way around the stud. Yeah, let's weld them up, see what we can do here. Just welded her on there. Doesn't look like we got too much weld on the actual nut itself, but it's definitely on there. It's gonna be interesting. I might give it a second before we try to pull it out, but I'm very interested to see if this works. Alright, well, first attempt on the completely sheared off one, it just broke again. Guess I didn't get good enough contact. Might turn up the heat a little bit, but gonna give her another shot. Take 2, and well, I've already loosened it a decent amount, so this isn't ratcheting anymore. Can't really hold the ratchet end, it's getting pretty hot. But check that out. Look at how easily it moves too. I think the heating definitely plays a role in how effective this method is, but oh, there we go, baby. I wish it dropped down to the ground. Where'd you go? Oh, shit, it's melting a line. There you go. There you are. Stud number 1 of 6 down. 5 more to go. Alright, second one is out here. I'm not going to touch it, that was a close call. But I would like to mention quickly, both attempts I had to put a bigger nut on. I'm not sure if I just had my power cranked up too much. I really wanted to make sure I had the heat at the max that I could without causing any permanent damage to anything, because it's only welding onto, you know, a tiny little bolt there. But as you can see, I melted away one side of the nut and could not wrench on it. I was able to get vice grips on it and it turned pretty easily, but I welded this bigger nut on top, just like that, and that gave me a little bit more leverage, better surface to grip on. Wasn't as worried about like stripping off this little head. I'm feeling much more confident after these first 2, and don't really think these guys are going to be that difficult. Of course the front 3 are kind of blocked by the strut tower, but whatever, we got this. Alrighty folks, it's the next day, and I'm very proud to report that we have successfully removed all 6 of the snapped off studs. You can see I had to use an array of different random miscellaneous pieces of hardware. Sometimes just the little nut worked, sometimes that didn't work and I had to weld on a bigger nut, and sometimes I actually had to use a bolt. I tried using the bolt twice. It worked once when the nut wasn't working for me, just because I couldn't really get my MIG welding gun at the right angle to fully fill in the nut, but I was able to manipulate it and get around at different angles to get the weld fully around this bolt. Just kind of depends on the scenario. But good to know that you have different options. You can really weld anything on that has a fastener head. I'm super glad to report this method does work. It's a hell of a lot safer than drilling, because drilling you have to drill perfectly in the center of that stud. And if you don't, you can go into the cylinder head, you can mess up the stud and not be able to remove it, or you just snap off the extractor inside of there and then you're really screwed. But let's not talk about that. Welding wise, I just used some flux core wire out of our Hobart MVP 210, although I do think you could do this with a 110. You don't really need a big unit like this. Preparation wise, I will say prep is extremely important. You're only welding to a tiny little pin head. There's not much surface area. So I had been using this carbide burr on the die grinder. This sucker cleans things up really well, and also, you know, just a classic little steel brush. Clean things, trust me, the few seconds that it takes is very much worth it. And I found that improper cleaning often resulted in the fastener just snapping off. So definitely take the 2 seconds, clean them off, and you'll be able to get all those snap studs out of your cylinder head. Wasn't really expecting this to turn into a full-on stud removal tutorial, but I'm glad that we could both learn something new here. This was definitely something new for me. My first time welding studs out of an engine, but I really hope this video helps you guys get some snapped off studs out of your engine or otherwise. I've ordered up a new cat. This vehicle is over 15 years old now. It's a 2005. So here in Mass, if it's over 15 years, you're actually exempt from emission laws. So as long as I can get that check engine light to go away, I don't really care if the O2 sensor passes. So I'm probably gonna try to yank this one, put it into the new cat that I've ordered. And I'm just gonna be honest, I cheaped out on the cat that I ordered for this, because what's the point? If the pipe's gonna hold, that's all that matters. I don't really care about the cat. I saw price differences from about $100 to $600. I went with a $150 one. We'll see how that works out. But for now, that's gonna wrap things up on the 2005 Tacoma TRD Off-Road Copart Rebuild. Hope you guys are finding this series fun. It's definitely unexpected for me. I'm sure none of you really expected me to do a Tacoma rebuild, but here we are. It's a blast. I'm learning a lot, and hope you guys are too. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on JD Cars.